going to sing this song. You really don't, when we sing it, we don't really need to read the scripture afterwards because this song is our scripture today from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. So sing along with us. This is just easy and it's fun. To everything, there is a season.
A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
And so Ecclesiastes is our text today. And again, we've been in this little series where we've looked at 3 books of the Bible that, like, if we had to vote again, some of us might vote that these should be excluded. So we did Job, which is a really hard book, and we did the Song of Songs, which is a very scandalous book, and now this one, Ecclesiastes, which is also a book of wisdom. And so it was neat that we sang the song, because that song's a protest song, actually originally written by Pete Seeger, who has written tons and tons of protest pieces over the years. But it was made famous by the Byrds in 1967. But at a time during the Vietnam War, the Vietnam conflict, as a way to say, that's why the end says, it's not too late. It's not too late for peace. But if I could have anyone get up here today and read this scripture passage in its right, proper tone and context or whatever, it would have to be celebrity, comedian, movie star, Bill Murray. Any fans of Bill Murray in here, in the house? Anyone? Have y'all seen him, famous from Caddyshack? I mean, that's Stripes, Meatballs, Ghostbusters. What About Bob? A modern classic, Lost in Translation, the numerous Wes Anderson films, and many others. So he is so good at playing that tired, world-weary human being with that dash of dark sense of humor, that really dark humor. In the movie Groundhog Day, Bill plays a weatherman named Phil, sent out to report on Punxsutawney Phil, the infamous celebrity groundhog who, according to legend and tradition, on Groundhog's Day can predict a shorter or longer winter. Any of you seen the movie? Have we all seen Groundhog Day at some point in our life? The plot of the movie is that Bill's character gets caught in this time loop and begins reliving the same day over and over and over. He experiences the full human spectrum and experience because of this. Like he goes from a first kind of glee and reckless abandon to boredom and agitation, despair, eventually depression and deep darkness before he begins to make something of his life. And now imagine that Bill Murray in that tone was here to read Ecclesiastes for us. There is a season for everything and a time for every matter under the heavens. Now, most of us, if we have heard this scripture passage before, it's beautiful, it's poetic, it sticks with you. It's been used on greeting cards. People pick it for their weddings. And it really does speak something powerful about kind of creation, the way creation is ordered, the way there seems to be an appropriateness to life, that there are different seasons to life, a season to be born, a season to die, a time for war, a time for peace, a time to embrace, a time to not be embraced, and so on and on. But when you look at the entirety of Ecclesiastes, when you thumb through the whole book, you get a different picture. You don't get those warm and fuzzy feelings. Like the very first verse, which goes, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. When I read Ecclesiastes, my mouth gets dry. I feel like I'm on the edge of a desert, an empty place, a lifeless place, a lifeless, empty world, a place kind of between one world and the next, an in-between place. Listen to some other verses from Ecclesiastes. From verse 16 of chapter 3. I saw something else under the sun. In the place of justice, there was wickedness. And in the place of what was right, there was wickedness again. In chapter 4, verse 3, it reads, but happier are those who have never existed, who haven't witnessed the terrible things that happen under the sun. I mean, this guy has issues. Or in chapter 5, verse 10, the money lover isn't satisfied with money, neither is the lover of wealth satisfied with income. This too is pointless. Have any of you ever had a friend who would talk about how things are pointless? Or some of you may have had a teenage daughter who said, this is pointless. All right. The word pointless, according to my little search, comes out 30 times in this text. Even when the wisdom gets a little bit positive, like in chapter 3, verse 9, he says, rejoice, young person, while you are young. Your heart should make you happy in your prime. Follow all your heart's inclinations and whatever your eyes see, but know this, God will call you to account for all of these things. Yikes. These are not the words of an optimist or someone who sees the cup of life half full. These are the words of someone who has discovered that the world doesn't always work in the most logical way. The good guys don't always win. The bad people don't always lose. Wealth and income may not lead to happiness. Doing the right thing isn't always rewarded. Sometimes the people around you let you down for no apparent reason. This is the wisdom of someone who has seen the dark underbelly of life. Now, some theologians argue that Ecclesiastes was probably written by King Solomon, who, according to legend, was the wisest person to have ever lived. But Solomon's other work, Proverbs, comparatively, is day and night in difference. I mean, Proverbs is like the wise, good friend who gives this critical counsel in a time of need, whereas Ecclesiastes is like that grumpy neighbor who can't stop complaining about everything. The lawn, the weather, government, arthritis, the list goes on. Walter Brueggemann, one of the great Old Testament theologians, suggests that this book, however bleak, has its place. Though it might not mention God much and its wisdom may be a bit on the sour side, Ecclesiastes was penned during one of those periods in Israel's history when they were occupied by a larger empire. And during this time, it was immense change for them. The old system of life that they had clung to, their economic and political structures were fading away as new schemes, as new ways of being in power around money and real estate and connections kind of took the forefront. Most importantly, Israel did not control its own destiny. It had no say in governmental affairs. The people were completely at the whim of their new rulers. Thus, the old words of promise, the old psalms, the old practices, the tried and true ways passed down from generation to generation did not seem to fit anymore. The people were in limbo, the gray area between their past and their future. Perhaps then, this feeling of bitterness and a sense of resignation was kind of justified. Maybe God felt distant to them. Maybe their lives felt a little bit pointless. Why, oh Lord, do we live if it all feels so pointless? But there's good news, okay? That's when Douglas Ann said, Nathan has a good word for us today. Good news. I was like, Ecclesiastes, yay. But there is good news, okay? There's good news. Walter Brueggemann, again, it says, one gift we receive from Ecclesiastes is that it is in the Bible at all right? That it made the cut somehow. And that's a gift. That we find this book in the Old Testament means that it must represent the real lived experience of the people of God, not just in that time, but throughout history. It gives us confidence that we stand and have inherited a tradition that's really broad and firm and gives us openness to speak about life, all the feelings of life. Sometimes we experience bitterness. Sometimes we feel like things don't make sense. Things are a bit meaningless. Second, Brueggemann adds, Ecclesiastes is a book of the in-between. The story of a people caught in a gray place, not life and not death, the edge of the desert, stuck at the horizon. As we know from the larger Bible story from books like Exodus, journeying through the desert often leads to promise. It leads to new challenges and new opportunities. If you can just hang in there and survive the dryness, the desert eventually gives way to the promised land, to fertile country. The in-between is thus not a final place. No one lives all their life in the gray. It's a place of transition. Ecclesiastes kind of gives insight into a people struggling to find their identity and develop new songs in a strange land and a strange time. It tells of a faith that is not overly optimistic and happy-go-lucky, but it's also not completely without hope either. It's a faith struggling to find balance and make sense of an unfamiliar world, A world where the old things are passing away and new things are emerging. I think it kind of sounds like our world, you know? And even in these last 20 years, the number of changes that have occurred, like the internet, that are affecting the old way that we used to make money and the way we used to do business and the way we used to relate to other countries and to our neighbors. Things are changing. And so there are a lot of people, even maybe some of you here, who feel like you're in that gray place. You're in that in-between place, between one world and the next. You're coming out of addiction, but you still got a ways to go. You're healing after the loss of a loved one, but the pain is still fresh. You've made it through a divorce, but you still don't feel whole. You figured out what not to do with your life, but you can't figure out what next to do with your life. You feel confident about your future, but you aren't sure about your present. You're waiting for a word from God, but you're tired of waiting. Ecclesiastes may be your kind of book, reassuring us that living in the gray is part of life. And what we do while we're in the gray is kind of simple, and Ecclesiastes repeats it over and over again. Eat, drink, enjoy your work, savor the little things. Deal with the hand that life gives you. Because we don't stay in the gray forever. The winter doesn't last another 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years. Sunlight begins to trickle in. Life begins to warm. The desert gives way to green fields and flowing waters. We find new songs to sing, new ways to worship God, new friends, new communities, even new reasons to live. Ecclesiastes challenges us to live for the moment, and if our moment is sour, to know that many other pilgrims have walked this way, and it is only just for a season. As was looking at the news and everything this week, and I did not watch. We don't have cable TV at our home, so we didn't watch the service. But like Whitney Houston, some of you may have caught glimpses of it or clips of the service or just read about it. But here was a person who had many seasons of gray in her life, which is unfortunate, and struggled. A lot of folks get caught in those cycles of gray, but they emerge. And even now, we can rest. We have faith, just as they shared through that service, that Whitney's gray is no longer. Finally, her struggle is over. She can be at peace. I'm curious today if there are any other witnesses, if anyone else wants to share of a period of gray in their lives that has now either given way to new life or some other story. From dying to giving birth, from uprooting to planting, from killing to healing, from tearing down to building up, a season for all things under heaven. Thanks be to God, for as the psalmist reminds us, the gray may last the night, but the joy comes in the morn. Praise be to God. Thanks for checking us out this week on our YouTube channel, EDCC TV. You can always find out more information about us at edcc.org or tabledallas.org. Again, we're so glad you checked us out, and we want to remind you, too, that wherever your life is, if it's in a season of gray, that this too shall pass, and there is new life, another season just around the corner. So prayers for you. May you be blessed. Come check us out sometime on the web or right here at 629 North Peak Street, Dallas, Texas.